Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Stories That Inspire Us / the author series. Today, I have an amazing guest on today, and I'm so excited to get this interview going. But I really want to ask a question before I kind of start. Do you live with pain? Many people do. Many people have very, very different type of medical things going on where they are constantly 24/7 living with pain. And Fran is no exception. So first of all, I want to welcome to the Stories Podcast, Fran Garton. Thank you so much for being here today on the Stories Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Janice. I'm really excited to be here.
You are so welcome. Now, wow, Fran does a lot, okay? Along with being a #1 bestselling co-author of the amazing book, Body Bliss, The Journey to Body Acceptance. It's an absolute amazing book. She's also a speaker, pain reduction coach, and fibromyalgia warrior. Wow. Sometimes I don't know where to start, but my first question obviously is going to be, you lived with fibromyalgia, and I think fibromyalgia is one of those misunderstood diagnoses that people just don't understand. They don't get it, that when somebody is living with fibromyalgia 24/7, it affects everything.
That is absolutely true. And, for people who maybe don't know what fibro is, maybe I'll just start and tell a little bit about that. So, fibromyalgia is lumped into the arthritis family. However, it is not an inflammatory condition. It is not a degenerative condition, and it is not progressive by the medical definition. Okay, so with arthritis, you could have degeneration of the joint and of the cartilage and all that, but that doesn't happen with fibro. So fibromyalgia affects all of the muscles and connective tissue. And what it is, basically, in the simplest terms, is it's a heightened reaction or heightened sensitivity to all stimuli. So light, touch, heat, sound, all of those things. So somebody who has fibromyalgia compared to somebody who doesn't. So if I have my fibro, you don't. So if you were to bang your hand, Janice, on the corner of your desk, you would kind of go, oh yeah, it hurts a little bit. And you kind of rub it off, and then off you would go. And maybe you'd get a bruise, but nothing would affect you. Somebody who has fibro, when they bang their hand, that could start a flare, and that pain could be, and we have to measure pain in a scale of 1 to 10. So that pain could be like a 10. And it could last for hours. And it could then be the catalyst that causes a flare in other areas of the body just from that movement and that banging that hand. So we are hypersensitive to the stimuli that we interact with in our life. So like sunlight is beautiful. And as we're going into winter, we all are missing the sun and praying for more days of sun. But sun and light is extremely hard on my eyes. Like, I wear sunglasses a lot of the time, and even when it's a cloudy day, I have sunglasses on because there's still light, and I'm very sensitive to it. So that's what fibro is. You're just over sensitive to the stimuli. And so then what happens, though, is there's so many other things happening in your body and other things that cause pain, not just a physical injury, that then there's inflammation in the body, and then there's digestive issues, and there's all different kinds of things that are part of fibromyalgia. So pain is not as simple as it sounds.
And that is so true, because when you talk about, my hitting my hand versus you hitting your hand, and you have that flare up, that's a referred type of pain thing. Like, it's just not going to stay there in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
That again affects everything. The hypersensitivity at that point is even more so heightened.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a story behind your story, because you didn't get to where you are today by not going through your story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is just so amazing about your story. And I want to read one little thing, actually two little things. One is in the back of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to let people know, obviously, this is a fantastic book. I've already said that. Body Bliss is an uncensored, vulnerable, and honest recounting of the stories.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to read something that you wrote, which stands out to me so significantly.
Mm-hmm.
I rebelled against traditional norms that would label me as beautiful.
Mm.
And I kind of sat back for a moment and I thought, I just want to go to where she is right now and give her a hug. That touched my heart and my soul. And that really is kind of the behind the scenes of your story.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, it's very interesting when you go through a process of writing or whatever journey you're through, and you kind of get through it and you go on and you think, oh, that's good. And then when you hear things back, you're like, oh, that's a very powerful statement. So anyway, thank you. I received that hug.
I'm so glad. And it made me sad for a moment. But then again, I thought about it as I read your chapter, and I kept going back to that paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, like this is such a profound statement. Your story, so raw, so vulnerable, that so many other women, and I'm sure some men, but I want to say 99.9% women,
Mm-hmm.
go through. And you are beautiful inside and out, showing your raw vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of courage, and I want to recognize that in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you go through your story, and I think it's a short form of your story.
Yeah.
Obviously, but you share some very intimate details.
Mm-hmm.
And not only just what you were going through, but in your family life. Can you go back to that moment where you were describing in your chapter?
Mm-hmm.
Again, another profound thing I thought, which you were describing, you were going through a flare up, and you're married, and in that moment you just felt like, what was that like to you when you read that back to yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, so for people who have not read the chapter yet, it's my husband is very supportive. He always has been. And when you mentioned this earlier when we were just talking about fibro and not understanding it completely. One of the key things with people, anybody that has any kind of chronic pain or any kind of trauma really that you're dealing with, it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And when people are in that cycle, they just don't get it. And so my husband, who's a wonderful human being, and like I said, very supportive, he would just say, yeah, I understand. And yeah, I know what you're going through. You can't possibly know what I'm going through. And it really does get irritating. And I felt like this horrible person. Like I think I refer to my chapter like this fire-breathing dragon. And she raises her head and she's ready to torch things, because as soon as someone who's in chronic pain, when you hear from someone, oh yeah, I have pain too, or oh, I understand how you feel, you do not understand, because it's like, so there's this theory, this Spoony Theory, that was created by, oh god, I'm gonna forget her name now, Christine Garagambino. I'm butchering her name, but anyway, Spoony Theory. People that have chronic pain, you only have so many spoons in a day. So this is a great analogy to understand. You only have so many spoons in a day. So you get 10 spoons, Janice. So for me, if I have fibro, I get up in the morning, cost me 1 spoon. I take a shower, another spoon. I get ready for my day, another spoon. If I have kids, I'm getting them ready for work, for school, sending them off to school, packing lunches, There's another spoon. I'm at 9 o'clock in the morning, maybe, and I've already used 4 of my 10 spoons. And for a person who has chronic pain, you cannot regenerate those. Someone who doesn't have chronic pain, like maybe you, could go and lie down, have a nap, go for a walk, and you get energized again and you move on with your day. And so that's sort of the big thing as I think about what I wrote in my chapter. When I think about that moment and the relationship with my husband, it's just, he cannot understand. And you get to the point where you just want people to go away. And you don't want to talk about it anymore. Pardon me. You don't want to have to explain anything because they just don't get it. And it's very frustrating. It's very hard for people that are in any kind of relationship when you're dealing with chronic pain, because you have so many other things to navigate, and then you have to talk to somebody who doesn't understand what you're going through. And it really, it did affect our marriage. I mean, I think for us and for anybody who's listening that's going through stuff, you kind of go into survival mode. You don't live and you don't thrive and you don't really enjoy stuff. You just kind of get through it. And we were in survival mode for a very long time because prior to my diagnosis, they didn't know what was happening. They were throwing things around like cancer and MS and brain tumor. They had no idea what was going on with me. And so at that point, you just kind of go through the day, do what they tell you, take whatever meds they give you, and hope that there's some kind of resolution or feeling of not wanting to chop your head off. So it's very difficult. And when I think back to it, it's very hard for me to remember all of that time period, because at one point I was in so much pain I couldn't even walk. Like, it was so bad. Like, I would go through my day and I'd push through like we're taught to do and go to work and then come home and literally I just go to bed. And I lived on ibuprofen and Gravel and whatever other meds the doctors managed to give me. And so there was a point in that period of time where I was very heavily medicated. And all I remember is taking meds and then taking more meds. Like, I don't really remember what happened. So even now, there are times where I'll be talking to people that I knew back then, and they would say something. They would refer to a conversation that we had. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And I'm like, yeah, we had this and they would detail it to me to the exact, where were we? What time of day it was? What were we doing when we were having this conversation? Like, very detailed pieces of information to try and jog my memory. And I just look at them and go, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't remember even having the conversation at all, because it's such a blank time in your life. And I think that when you go through traumatic experiences and you're trying to deal with them and navigate and just kind of get through life, that there are pieces that you're like, that's not important. I don't need to remember that, because you got to remember taking pills, or you got to remember to take care of yourself, or to have a shower, or whatever. Talk to people like they're humans. Like, it sounds very, and I say it kind of flippantly, but it's not. It's very serious, but you don't really realize it in the moment. When you look back on it, you're like, wow. Like, I think my dragon was very present. I think she was, and no offense to dragons, for anybody who's listening, I love dragons. So, but it just is the perfect image. Just this fire-breathing dragon, and she just hangs out, and then every once in a while, someone says, I understand how you feel, and she comes up and blasts them with their fire, because that's what you do. And I'm sure that I did. Absolutely I did, because I was in so much pain, and I just didn't want to have to deal with people, because I didn't know how to cope.
And I think the other flip side of that, you stated that, you're taking medication. The doctors are thinking maybe it's cancer, or maybe it's a brain tumor, maybe it's this, maybe it's MS. I mean, to me, that's like throwing spaghetti to the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how were you finally diagnosed? Like, I guess the question I want to ask is, did you have to like fight that type of a process?
Yeah, so from onset of symptoms to actually getting a diagnosis was almost a year and a half. And it's a little bit different here in Ontario than it is in the States. So we get referred by our GP to a rheumatologist, which is a specialist in arthritis type things. And waiting for that could be anywhere up to a year, sometimes longer for an appointment. And so in the interim, my family doctor was like, well, I think it's fibro, but we need to, so we need to get a set diagnosis. But the thing with fibromyalgia, and this is where the loveliness of this illness, this condition comes in, is there is no test for it. Like I can't do a blood test. I can't do any of those things. It's basically 18 trigger points in your body, so tender areas. And if you have 11 of them minimum, and you've had extreme pain for 3 to 6 months, it depends on where you look at that range, who you're consulting with, then they'll say that you have fibromyalgia. And the problem with fibro is many people, and I would say the majority of people, don't just have fibro. They have other things. So I have osteoarthritis. I know people that have lupus and fibro. So it comes with other things. So sometimes it's kind of difficult for the diagnosis because you have other symptoms that lead and point towards one condition and then other things that point towards fibro. So it is kind of hard, but you do wait for the diagnosis. But the thing is that at my height of pain, I was like 15 out of 10. Like that's the height of it. And then when I got my diagnosis and started taking meds for it, then I went down to like 7 or 8 was kind of my daily. And I was like, this is awesome. Like 7 out of 10? Woo! That's like half of what I was. Like, you're like, woo, I won the lottery. Everything's great. But it wasn't, because now I don't have pain at all. Like, okay, I might have a flare. I might overdo something and then my body starts talking to me, but it's not like it was. And so if it's a painful, and I'll put that in quotation marks, day, I might be a 3 or a 4. And, I always joke about this because my husband, he's so amazing, but he'll just go, like, I'll say, oh, I'm in pain, babe. And he's like, oh, so where are you on the scale? Like, I'm like 3. And he's like, oh, psh, 3 is not pain, because I lived at 15 and then I was at 8 and now now he's kind of like, not that he doesn't care, but now he kind of is like, are you really, or are you just tired today? I'm like, well, maybe I'm just tired and I just want to say that I'm in a lot of pain so I can have a nap, but it's interesting how relative it is from when you go from such a high pain level and then you get to the low end, right? And our reaction to it as well, right? I don't think I could handle an 8. If I had a day of 8, I don't know that I could physically or mentally take it. But there is a time gap. Coming back to your question, there was that almost 2-year period that I just didn't know what was happening. And it was terrifying. Like, it's very, very terrifying. Having a diagnosis is so nice in the sense that, okay, I have a name, I have a label to it. Does that really matter in the big scheme of things? Not really, because in my experience, fibro's been around for a very long time, like a very long time. This is not a new condition, but they still don't know a lot about it. And the more I dove into it myself and started working on healing myself, then I became a little bit more knowledgeable about pain and what pain looks like and how pain manifests, because we think about pain as injury. I have an injury and then I get pain and that's it. Or my body is protecting me, so it gives me a pain signal. Don't do that anymore, or don't continue that because you could injure yourself. It's not safe. But there's so many other things that cause pain. And if we only look at those causes and forget about all the other ones, then we can't really solve our pain issue.
That is so true. And, thank you so much for really describing that in depth, because I think it's really important for people to know that are maybe going through it, or, maybe there's the spouse or caregiver, whatever it may be, for that person to kind of have a backdrop type of understanding, which kind of leads me to being a pain reduction coach and a body inclusive personal trainer,
Mhm.
but that comes from your story.
Yeah. So, I'll talk about the body inclusive thing. I really, as a personal trainer, you go and you get your certification, and then you see all these images in magazines and Beachbody, and I'm not poo-pooing on Beachbody, but I'm just, everyone knows what it is, so I'm just going to use that as an example. And you look at these people and you're like, that's not me. Like, it's just not me. That's not who I am. I'm not going to be that I have big boobs. I got junk in my trunk. I'm not this tiny little, I'm not the typical image of what you find in the fitness industry, which is why I have a big problem with it, actually. And I don't even like the word personal trainer. It's just people know what it is, so I use it. But my clients, when I work with them, it's not about losing weight and it's not about being a particular size. It's about being healthy, strong, mobile, flexible, and being able to do things that you enjoy. Like, to me, that's what movement is. I don't even use the word fitness or exercise. I use movement because I really don't like these. Like, I had a client here yesterday and she's like, I want to lose this weight. Okay, if you want to lose the weight, that's great. But if you want me to track your weight, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to ask you to do that. It's just not how I do things. I would rather you be mobile and be able to walk and be strong than to lose 20 pounds. I mean, that might be a wonderful side effect, but I don't personally believe that should be the driving force behind anything. Because, like you said, we are all beautiful, we are all amazing the way that we are. And if you want to lose weight, great. I'm not saying don't do that. But what I'm saying is, as a body inclusive trainer, just because I'm in a body that physically doesn't meet the standards that the media portrays, doesn't mean that you're not healthy. Doesn't mean that you're not working on making yourself better than you already are and being healthier than you already are. And so I really like the inclusiveness of it. Everybody can do things. I have clients that are 80 years old and I have clients that are 35 years old. And it's not about losing weight. It's about being strong and being able to do stuff.
I love that. You know why? Because I once was a personal trainer and obviously fell in love with fitness. And by the way, I don't like the word exercise myself. I'm often say exercise, but I call it movement because
Yes.
for me it has a negative connotation.
Yep.
For me in my journey, which people are well familiar with, I think if we just focus on the aspect of it, excuse me, of being healthy, being comfortable of how we look. I mean, it's all from the inside coming outward. And as a byproduct of that, if we lose weight, okay, great. And I think there is just too much pressure. Okay, you have to lose weight. You have to look this way. Like, that's all BS. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
That's BS.
Yeah. And I love that, and I think that that's one of the things why people resonate with me is because that's not who I am. Like, and if you see me, I'm not a large person, or I'll put that in quotation marks. I don't even know what that means, large person, but I'm not this little stick person. Like, I'm not what I see in media. It's not well represented. And I think that it really does disservice to people because it's terrifying to decide that in whatever capacity, to decide you want to step forward and make some changes in your life, whether it's mindset, whether it's physically, whether it's health, whatever it is, it's terrifying. And then when you show up to a place or you start talking to someone, you meet a coach, and what you want to do, they portray that in a different way, it doesn't match. So, like, I can't, I would be afraid. I would be, ashamed maybe, or scared to go with a personal trainer who is this tiny little person, and that's not what I want. So it doesn't resonate with me. And I think for a lot of people it is really terrifying to get onto that journey, and you need somebody who understands that. And I think that's why there are so many coaches out there, because we all are connected with certain people, right? And I have colleagues who are in the industry and they're all about weight loss and transformation, and they're awesome at what they do. It's not what I do. Can I do it? Yes. Do I want to do it? Absolutely not. So I do really think it does, impact how you feel about yourself. And I think that's the most important thing. And so whatever you might be doing and whoever you're working with to journey to a better you is awesome. But it shouldn't just be about the physical appearance.
I agree with you. And with that being said, I'm going to ask you a very pointed type of question.
Okay.
I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it. How do you feel about yourself
today? Oh, I love myself. I'm amazing. I'm a freaking rock star. Yeah.
I love it.
I'm awesome. Like, and I know it's when people, and it's interesting because when people say that, depending on who you're with, right? When you're with other people who are very accepting of themselves and they love themselves and they've done the work and they've gone through all the things, right? And they're kind of, I mean, we're still all going through the journey, but you're farther along than maybe people who are beginning. When you're with those people and you say things like, I'm awesome, they go, yeah, you are. And you don't feel bad saying it. But then when you're in other environments and you're like, I'm amazing, people kind of look at you like, who says that about themselves? Like they have this look on and you can see the wheels in their head going, why would she say she's amazing? I am amazing. I'm an amazing trainer. I'm a fantastic coach. I was an educator for 16 years. I'm an amazing instructor. Like I know that I am. But if you asked me that many, many years ago, I wouldn't say that about myself. Because I think, I always have that. What would you tell your 20-year-old self? Right? That question. Yeah, I tell my 20-year-old self that you're amazing. You're fine the way you are. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to fix. Move forward. Do the things you want to do. That's what I would tell my younger self.
Oh my gosh. I was just kind of cracking up to myself and I thought for a moment, what would I say to my 20-year-old self?
Yeah.
Well, that was like 40 years ago. So I'm really not sure what I would say. I have a lot of things I could say, but what would I say to my 20-year-old self? I think I would say, despite having certain things that happen in your life, you are flipping awesome. And just remember that, own it, own who you are.
Yeah. And if we, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting exercise. I give it to my clients actually when I do coaching, pain coaching with them. We talk about that and they write letters to themselves and they talk to their body. And I think it's interesting because when you actually reflect on it and think about, what would I say? How would I do things differently? It kind of puts you in this position where you have to decide, am I really connected to who I am today? Or am I still that person from 20 years ago? And if you are, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But maybe it's a moment that you can reflect and go, okay, so now moving forward, how can I make things different? How can I make different choices? Because the truth is, we've all been through hard things. And everybody's hard is different. And what I would say is hard, you'd be like, piece of cake, Fran, like what? And your hard, I go, what's wrong, Janice? Like, just do it, right? So we all have our hard things. And I think if we actually, and this is an exercise I'm going to give your audience, okay? This is one that my coach gave me. I want you to create what she calls a brag sheet. And you're going to take a piece of paper down. You're going to write down all the things in life that you've accomplished. And the important thing to remember about this is not just education and degrees and things, but things like I finished high school. I grew a human being. I grew 2 human beings and actually birthed them. And I actually raised them. And they're still alive. Like I went grocery shopping today. I cleaned my house. Like these are things that, like small things and big things. Like, but you should put that on a piece of paper. And then when you have a day that you're like, I can't get through it, go look at that sheet of paper and like really look at all the things that you've accomplished. You can also get through this thing that has shown up in your life, because going through fibro and, vision loss and all these other things, that they were really hard things. So now today, when someone's like, hey, let's go on a podcast. I do podcasts. Sure. Do you want to help run a retreat? Sure, I can do that. Would you like to do a presentation? Sure, I can do that. Like, I just say yes to things now because now I know that I'm amazing. Before, I kind of thought I wanted to be amazing, but didn't know if I could be. So that's kind of the difference. And now I'm like, no, I'm pretty amazing. I've done some amazing things.
I would say you're flipping amazing.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. And I just want to take a sidebar for a moment and welcome all of our listeners on the Wisdom Audio app. Thank you so much for being here today. And I see some familiar names. I obviously love wisdom, but let's get back to the
Yes.
topic of conversation. Being a pain reduction coach and being a fibromyalgia warrior, have you had clients that have dealt with that same issue, and what have they shared with you that maybe you learned from their story?
Yeah. So I have this client who she talks about edges a lot. And when she's talking about her pain. And so what she's dealing with now and what she's talking about with edges is she kind of pushes herself, and it's kind of like sort of like an imaginary barrier, like this transparent barrier, and like a bubble that she's in. And she kind of pushes against it, and those are her edges. And she's dealing with trying to feel the edge before she gets too far into her pain cycle. And so I find that very interesting from an imagery point of view, because she's like, it's like I have a bubble around me and I stretch my arms out to the side, and she goes, and I can feel the bubble. She goes, but what I do when I push through my life is I actually let the bubble come very, very close. So my hands are only about 2 or 3 inches away from my body. And that is where the bubble that I've lived in. But I actually need to expand the bubble so that when my arms are totally outstretched, I feel the edges before I've hit the height of my pain. And so she spends a lot of her time talking about these edges and how to feel into them. So she's very poetic speaker and writer, actually. And when she talks about her, if you read it, you'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe you have fibromyalgia, because it's just so beautiful. It's like poetry. But she's like, I kind of will, if I feel that there's some pain coming, she's like, I actually will lean into it, like physically lean into it and kind of see if I can feel where that edge is. And she's like, I'm working on expanding it. So being more aware of her body talking to her and listening to the messages coming from her body, because all of us, our bodies talk to us. Our bodies tell us things. We don't always listen to them, but we always get feedback from our body. And oftentimes, let's say when we're talking about pain, if I get a pain in my shoulder, I go, oh yeah, it kind of is bothering me. But I continue on with my day. I continue on doing what I'm doing. And then it gets a little bit more intense. I'm like, it'll be okay. And then by the time it's like I'm 8 out of 10, I've gone beyond that comfortable level. And now I'm in a flare, right? Now it could last for hours. Whereas if I had listened to that first piece of information and feedback, I could have changed what I was doing. I could have stopped. I could have rested. I could, whatever, taken meds, whatever you do, to hold that pain level at a lower rate. But instead I pushed through. So she talks a lot about listening to the body and paying attention, because sometimes the messages from our body are not what we expect. So what I mean by that is, let's say I have shoulder pain. And that's normal. And then one day I get pain in my finger. And I think, oh, that's weird. Well, it's weird, but from a physiological point of view and from anatomy, our finger is attached to our shoulder. So maybe the body, and this is what I mean about listening to the body always gives me shoulder pain and gives me the feedback here. So I'm used to that. But I don't get it in my pinky. And what's happening is the body's really smart. And the brain's like, well, she's not listening to the shoulder. So let's change it up a little bit. Let's give her pain in her finger. And maybe Fran will listen and stop because we've given her something new. Whereas if it's the usual pain in my shoulder, I'm like, it's fine. I know. I got pain. But when I change the location and it switches, then that's the body kind of adapting and thinking for you and saying, hey, lady, stop doing that. Like, let's pay attention. So it is interesting to hear and listen to our body, because it always sends messages. We just ignore them.
That is true. And, I think it goes back to, we may hear what's going on, but we're not tuning in, therefore we're not listening.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that is so true. A little sidebar, I broke my right foot about a year and a half ago. It was right before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm very cognizant of how, and I love to kickbox. So obviously I have to be very careful, right? So I banged my foot so bad about 6 weeks ago, I broke my little pinky toe,
Ooh.
the same foot. So now I'm like, I want to kickbox, but let's be realistic here. Like that
Yeah.
would have just been detrimental. I will confess that I did sit near my bag and I was punching it, but and I'm just kind of, sidebar
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
So, if I had gone and went ahead and kickbox, like that just doesn't make any sense. So you have to listen to
Mm-hmm.
your body in so many different ways. That is
And
so
it's
true.
yeah, and it's really hard though. Like even you saying that you went and you were punching the bag, like because you're like, okay, I can do something. Okay, yes, you can, but should you? And so there's two sides to that. So one I would say so I'll talk from a trainer point of view. That's awesome. You modified. You couldn't do the kicking part, but you did the punching part. You did it sitting down, not standing up. Awesome. Like you got a workout in, even though it wasn't the full. That's awesome from my trainer side. From my pain side, I'm like, maybe we should just rest. Maybe the body needs to like, do you know what I mean? So it's always a double-sided thing, right? And the listening part is important and responding to that, but there's also the emotional part. And I think that's part of, what you probably were feeling was like, oh, and that frustration of like, come on, it's just a pinky. It's just a baby toe. Like it's not a big deal. That's a big deal. That's an important part of the foot. Like so you're frustrated because you're like, come on, why is this happening? Right? I should be able to just work through it. It'll be fine. It'll be here. It'll heal. We don't like to wait for anything. We like everything to be like this and quick and fixed and push through. And sometimes resting is the most important thing that you can do. It's not the action part, it's the resting part that is the most important. Um, yeah, that's what
Yeah, and the weird thing is I still have this huge black and blue, but it's fine. It's
yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
fine. But yeah, you're so right. Listening to your body really is the key to sorry about the background noise.
I hear nothing.
Okay, good. Well, I'm sure maybe that my listeners on Wisdom may hear it. So I do apologize for that. This is the beauty of live podcasting. I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
Question for you. Do you have a couple more minutes?
I do.
Okay. I would love to invite one of our listeners from the Wisdom Audio app if you'd like to, and we have time for one guest to come up. If you'd like to come up on stage, maybe join in the conversation, or maybe you have some very specific questions for Fran or myself, we would of course welcome the opportunity for you to do that, and we'll give it just a minute or so. Fran, what would you say, what is on the horizon for you? Like, is there this huge goal that you are trying to reach at this point?
So there's two things I have in my brain and my heart. I'm not sure, maybe both. One is I would like to write a book myself. I would like to, actually, there's three things. I would like to write a journal, create a journal. I have not been able to find a journal to deal with pain and fibro that has been useful. I not that they're not good, because I have bought a few of them, but just they don't work for me. So I'd like to design something that works for my system and me and how I do things, because everybody's different, right? And then the other thing I want to do is I really want to create like I don't know what to call it, affirmation, pain response deck of cards.
Yes.
So I'm still ruminating on it. It's still coming to life in my brain, but that's something that I would like that I could create for people to use and to help them as they go through their pain journey.
I think that is amazing. And I do see your own book coming out next Christmas. So you have to start working on it now.
Okay, next Christmas. Okay. All right. I've
That's
received
what
that.
I see.
Okay, perfect.
Good, good. How can our viewers and listeners get in contact with you?
They can find me on Instagram is probably the easiest. Fran Garton Pain Coach is my Instagram handle, and they can just reach out, DM me there. And there's also a on my Instagram page, there's a link tree, and there's a free stress stress quiz to figure out what's going on in your life. And stress is a really big driver of pain. So if you're not managing your stress, then I can guarantee 100% that you have pain.
Oh my goodness, that is wonderful. And of course, I will make sure that all your contact information is in the show notes. This has been an absolutely amazing podcast. And I am so excited for you and your other co-authors on this. This is the book, and I know that our listeners cannot see this, but our viewers, can certainly see it. Body Bliss, The Journey to Body Acceptance. These are the stories that inspire us. My name is Janice Malillo, your host, and I'm going to do the sign off on wisdom, and then we'll do our official sign off on Facebook. Again, I want to thank all of my amazing listeners. You are what makes it possible for me to absolutely love what I do. Stories is about those inspiring stories where we get to inspire, connect, engage, and share what we're passionate about, but more importantly, to help others. Thank you, Wisdom, for being here today, and we will see you again real soon. Bye for now. Hey, Facebook and everybody else out there in podcast land. I can't thank Fran enough for being here today. Shared some amazing value and an insight to her very raw, vulnerable, and personal story. We are inspired when open our hearts to those around us. It's all about creating that ripple effect. I am forever grateful, forever blessed. As many of you know, Stories That Inspire Us was inspired by my son's story. And I want to encourage you, if you have a story to share, it's that important. It means somebody needs to hear it. Please reach out to me and I would be happy to chat with you further. Fran, thank you again so much. So excited to have you here today. I know she'll definitely be on again. She'll be a repeat offender for sure, but in a good way.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're so welcome. Hey, everyone. Again, my name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, I was truly inspired by the amazing Fran Garton. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.